This is your one and only 𝐈𝐸𝐻81 with your daily dose of video goodness, and today I'm going to show you how to boost your damage to insane heights in Elden Ring. Let's get to it. What I'm going to show you today is effectively a way to boost your damage to the point of which you are doing double damage. This will work with any build, although you're going to have to make a few changes here and there depending on what weapons you are using. But today I'm going to show you how to do it with the dual blades. And that is because with this setup, the dual blades are the most effective at dealing damage the fastest, but that doesn't necessarily matter because any build can use this setup and still hit the same damage numbers, if not more, depending on what weapons you're using. Also, keep in mind that in the footage that you are seeing and the footage that you are going to see in this video and the numbers that you're going to see in this video is on an extremely unoptimized build. I was just testing stuff with this and still am able to just decimate bosses and pretty much anything I run into with an unoptimized build. So you can just imagine how devastating it would be on an optimized build. So let's get into the details. First off, this setup only works if you are using weapons which can use Ashes of War, and you have to power stance, aka dual wield your weapons. And we'll get into the why here in a second. First thing we're going to talk about is 2 talismans that you need in order to make this work that are part of the heart of this setup. And that is the Kindred of Rot exaltation and the Lord of Blood's exaltation. Then you also need a helmet, and your helmet is flexible depending on what setup you are using. I'll get into more of that here in a minute, but you either need the mushroom crown or the white mask. Either one of these gives you a 10% damage bonus depending on whether you are proccing bleed and or proccing poison. Using either the mushroom crown or the white mask, along with the Kindred of Rot's exaltation and the Lord of Blood's exaltation, if you proc a blood buildup and a rot or poison buildup at the same time with one of those helmets on, you end up with a 50% damage increase with just these 3 items. Next, let's talk about how to set up your weapons in order to maximize your damage and proc all 3 of these things at the same time. In order to set up your weapons properly, you are going to need the glintstone wet blade and the black wet blade. The glintstone wet blade is going to let you give your weapon frost affinity, which is going to allow you to boost your damage even more once you proc frost. And the black wet blade is key because that is going to let you do poison, blood, or occult affinity, and we need either poison or blood. On your main hand weapon, you can use whatever Ash of War you wish to use on it. In this demonstration, I'm using Bloodhound Step because it gives you just insane maneuverability. On this main hand weapon, you want to make sure that no matter what Ash of War you are using, you spec it to cold. This is going to ensure that you get a frost buildup. You can see here that I'm getting a frost buildup on this one of 125. On your offhand weapon, you have a few different options, and what you pick is going to depend on whether or not your offhand weapon natively has bleed. So for example, if I was going to use the Scavenger's Curved Sword that you see here, it has blood loss build up on it natively. So when I am selecting my Ash of War, it doesn't matter what Ash of War you pick, just pick one because you're not going to use the Ash of War in this instance. You want to make sure that you spec it for poison affinity. The Ash of War that you use on your offhand weapon doesn't make a difference only if your weapon has bleed natively. The only thing that is important in that situation is that you make sure that you spec it for the poison affinity so that the weapon can have poison buildup and blood loss buildup on it at the same time, which will trigger your helmet and your 2 talismans, giving you a total of a 50% damage bonus. If you are using a weapon like I am using here that does not have bleed natively, you need to make sure that you are using a weapon that you can put seppuku on. That is because this is going to give your weapon a bleed effect when you proc it. But the important thing to do here is when you are putting seppuku onto your weapon, you use the poison affinity. This ensures that your weapon has a poison buildup effect on it. Then before you go into battle, you will double fist your offhand weapon, you proc seppuku, and then you re-equip your other weapon. This does two things. As you can see there at the top, it immediately activates Lord of Blood's Exaltation, and it gives your weapon the bleed ability. So right now, this weapon can inflict bleed and poison at the same time. Now, if you are running a weapon that does not have bleed on it natively, and you are running this setup, you need to run the Mushroom Crown. You don't have to run the Mushroom Crown because, and especially early on, you're not going to have access to it. You will probably have access to the White Mask well before you have access to the Mushroom Crown, although the Mushroom Crown is easier to get a hold of because you basically just run through the Lake of Rot to grab it. The reason we do this is because we are running poison full time on our weapon, which is going to allow us to frequently gain the 10% increased damage we get from the Mushroom Crown and the 20% that we get from the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation without constantly having to keep the blood buildup effect on our weapon. Now, once again, you don't have to do this. This is just going to be the most efficient setup for you when you're just running around willy-nilly, killing whatever you want to kill without really having to constantly keep a buff up. Then when you're going to fight a more tougher enemy, like a boss or something, you can just double fist and proc the bleed buildup on your weapon to effectively run around and destroy a boss much faster, making sure that you also are getting your max damage out of this setup. This setup is designed to be the lowest maintenance possible, and it's at its absolute lowest maintenance if you are running weapons that have native bleed on it, because you can ensure that your offhand weapon has bleed and poison at the same time, allowing you to 1, use whatever helmet you want, and 2, just run around at all times with all of your buffs up. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, but Firespark, what if I am running a weapon that does not have bleed on it and I can't put seppuku on it? You said this setup was viable for all builds, and it is. Slightly more convoluted, but it is still doable. So on your offhand weapon, you will run whatever Ash of War you want to run, but you are going to make sure that you have it set to poison. This is going to ensure that your offhand weapon will proc your helmet and the Kindred Exaltation. This is going to get you a 30% increase in damage when you proc poison buildup using your offhand weapon. For your main hand option, in order to proc the Lord of Blood, you are going to need to ensure that you can run incantations, and you will need to make sure that you can run the Blood Flame Blade incantation. It's only going to cost a 12 faith investment, but what you will do is before you go into a boss fight, you will use this on your main hand weapon, allowing you to get blood buildup from your main hand weapon, and you will get poison buildup naturally from your offhand weapon. So now that we got all of that out of the way and you understand how to get the initial setup, let's talk about boosting your damage even further, because what you use past this point is going to be up to you and dependent on your specific play style. If you are running dual blades, I highly recommend the Raptor's Black Feathers as your chest armor, the Claw Talisman, and the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia, or just the Winged Sword Insignia. This is because the dual blade setup, when you jump and you attack and you do a jump attack, you attack more times than any other weapon. Any other weapon setup that you use is going to just do more or less one downward thrust style hit. However, when you use this setup, you can see you attack a bunch of times in a row, which is going to do a few things. It's going to maximize the damage from all of those hits because all of those hits are your jump attack. And it is also going to give a ton of buildup of poison and blood on the target, allowing you to, in most cases, proc all of those things in one go. And in some cases, when all of those things don't proc, you can follow up with just a normal double attack like that and proc it shortly after. Now, if you are not running the Raptor's Feathers and you are not running the dual blade setup, I highly recommend running the Golden Vow incantation, because that's going to make up for the damage boost that you're going to lose from this. For your other talismans, if you do not want to run the Claw Talisman, you can also run the Twin Blade Talisman, which is going to get you a damage boost on the final hit of your chain attacks. Now, if you don't want to run that talisman, you also have the option of the Ritual Sword Talisman. This is going to get you a huge boost to your damage numbers as well, as long as you stay full health. You can replace the Rotten Winged Sword insignia with a few different things. You can use Millicent's prosthesis if you want to, which gives you 5 dexterity and will do essentially the same thing as this, but it's not going to give you as high as numbers as this will give you. You could also run the Ritual Sword Talisman and the Claw Talisman. If you are running a weapon that has an Ash of War on it that enchants your weapon with lightning or holy or magic damage, you can use any one of the Scorpion Charms. Or if you're basically running around naked, you can also use the Blue Dancer Charm. Although this one's kind of trash and I don't really recommend this one. You're much better off using one of the other many options you have for boosting your damage. One last thing you can do to boost your damage even further is to use the Commander's Standard in your primary hand as a secondary weapon that you never actually attack with. And that is because the Rallying Stand Ash of War on this thing gives you a 20% damage boost. So what you would do is put it in your main hand, activate its Ash of War, then swap back over to your main hand weapon. And as you can see, the Ash of War is still active. It stays active for about 30 seconds or so, and then you will have to reactivate it again. But if you run into an enemy and you do that massive jump attack on it and you have everything else going, you are going to see insane damage numbers. Are we really doing over double damage? Well, I think I can demonstrate that. It's a little iffy when it comes to your attack power. If you go through everything and you have everything procced and you quickly look at your attack power, it appears that the Rotten Winged Sword insignia is bugged and your numbers will jump around. They'll get high, then low, then high, then low. And it only does that on this one. So I'm not 100% if this one's bugged or if just the interface is bugged and not showing accurate information with this one. However, if we were to use just the normal Winged Sword insignia, that jumping around does not happen. It will just show you your attack power. But this one does not get you as much AR as this one does. Once you have this one fully maxed out with a bunch of hits, it should be somewhere around 22%. However, what we can do is we can just take all of these off and unequip this and unequip this and leave our Ashes of War and everything the way they are the same on here, and just run out here and jump attack this guy one time and pay attention to the amount of damage that we do with a single jump attack. So if we come out here and quickly just jump at this guy, 987. We are now fully buffed, and I'm going to attempt to run up on this guy and have all of my buffs. 2,189 damage. And that was with a single jump attack. Now our no boosted attack was at 987. So at 2,189, if we divide that by 2, that leaves us at 1,094. So we were doing over double damage with that single jump attack, which is absolutely insane. So your numbers are going to vary a little bit depending on what your particular setup is and what you're going to have to do in order to hit your max damage value, getting you over double damage, but it is pretty easy to do no matter what your setup is. All right, well, hopefully you all found this video helpful and informational. If you did, consider hitting the subscribe button and notification bell so you can be notified when I upload other videos like this. I want to give an absolute massive shout out and thank you to my supporters on Patreon for making this episode possible. Y'all are absolutely amazing people. If you would like to join my elite crew of Patreon supporters, please check out the link in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. If you're shy, you don't like to comment, just hit that thumbs up button and show your support. Until next time, thanks for watching.